Hello, and welcome to Goodnight Flagstaff. I'm Matthew Banks, and I'm very excited to be back with you reading today. Thank you for tuning in to our community storytime. You can find a new chapter from one of our favorite family-friendly books at 8 p.m. each weeknight on the Literacy Center's YouTube channel and on Crater Radio, a local online radio station. The previous chapter is replayed on Crater Radio each weeknight at about 7:30, just before the new chapter airs. You can also listen to all of our previous Goodnight Flagstaff recordings on YouTube. We're currently reading The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. If you'd like to check it out and read along with us at home, it's available at the library. Check one out today with your Coconino County Library card. Please email us if you'd like to join our team of readers and connect with your community through stories. All ages are welcome. Our email is goodnightflagstaff@gmail.com. Last time we read together, we returned to Minas Tirith, where they waited for news of the last battle. And though Éowyn was healed physically, there was still a shadow in her. She wanted to die in battle. Faramir, who was also in the Houses of Healing, became her companion and grew to love her. And when the news had come of their victory, Éowyn did not answer her brother's summons, but she let Faramir heal her heart and agreed to marry him. All things were now made ready in the city, and there was great concourse of people, for the tidings had gone out into all the parts of Gondor, from Minrimmon even to Penethgelen and the far coasts of the sea. And all that could come to the city made haste to come. And the city was filled again with women and fair children that returned to their homes laden with flowers. And from Dol Amroth came the harpers that harped most skillfully in all the land. And there were players upon viols, and upon flutes, and upon horns of silver, and clear-voiced singers from the vales of Lebanon. At last an evening came, when from the walls the pavilions could be seen upon the field, and all night lights were burning as men watched for the dawn. And when the sun rose in the clear morning above the mountains in the east, upon which shadows lay no more, then all the bells rang, and all the banners broke and flowed in the wind, and upon the white tower of the citadel the standards of the stewards, bright argent, like snow in the sun, bearing no charge nor device, was raised over Gondor for the last time. Now the captains of the west led their hosts toward the city. The folk saw them advance in line upon line, flashing and glinting in the sunrise and rippling like silver. And so they came before the gateway and halted a furlong from the walls. As yet no gates had been set up again, but a barrier was laid across the entrance to the city. And there stood men-at-arms in silver and black with long swords drawn. Before the barrier stood Faramir the steward, and Hurin, warden of the keys, and other captains of Gondor, and the lady Éowyn of Rohan, with Elfhelm the marshal, and many knights of the mark. And upon either side of the gate was a great press of fair people in raiment of many colors and garlands of flowers. So now there was a wide space before the walls of Minas Tirith, and it was hemmed in upon all sides by the knights and the soldiers of Gondor and Rohan, and by the people of the city and of all parts of the land. A hush fell upon all, as out from the host stepped Dunedain in silver and grey, and before them came walking slow the Lord Aragorn. He was clad in black mail girt with silver, and he wore a long mantle of pure white clasped at the throat, with a great jewel of green that shone from afar. But his head was bare, save for a star upon his forehead, bound by a slender fillet of silver. With him were Éomer of Rohan, and the prince Imrahil, and Gandalf robed in all white, and 4 small figures that many men marveled to see. "Nay, cousin, they are not boys," said Eorith to her kinswoman from Imloth Melu, who stood beside her. "Those are Periain, out of the far country of the halflings, where they are princes of great fame, it is said. I should know, for I had one to tend in the houses. They are small, but they are valiant. Why, cousin, one of them went with only his esquire into the black country, and fought with the Dark Lord all by himself, and set fire to his tower, if you can believe it. At least that is the tale in the city. That will be the one that walks with our Elfstone. They are dear friends, I hear. Now he is a marvel, the Lord Elfstone, not too soft in his speech, mind you, but he has a golden heart, as the saying is, and he has the healing hands. The hands of the king are the hands of a healer, I said. And that was how it was all discovered. And Mithrandir, he said to me, Eoreth, men will long remember your words, But Eoreth was not permitted to continue the instruction of her kinswoman from the country, for a single trumpet rang, and the dead silence followed. Then forth from the gate went Faramir with Hurin of the Keys, and no others, save that behind them walked 4 men in the high helms and armor of the citadel, and they bore a great casket of black lebethron bound in silver. Faramir met Aragorn in the midst of those there assembled, and he knelt and said, The last steward of Gondor begs leave to surrender his office. And he held out a white rod, but Aragorn took the rod and gave it back, saying, That office is not ended, and it shall be thine, and thy heirs as long as my line shall last. Do now thy office. Then Faramir stood up and spoke in a clear voice, Men of Gondor, hear now the steward of this realm. Behold, one has come to claim the kingship again at last. Here is Aragorn, son of Arathorn, chieftain of the Dunedain of Arnor, captain of the host of the west, bearer of the stars of the north, wielder of the sword reforged, victorious in battle, whose hands bring healing, the Elfstone, Elisar of the line of Valandil, Isildur's son, Elendil's son of Numenor. Shall he be king and enter into the city and dwell there? And all the host and all the people who cried, Yea, with one voice. And Eoreth said to her kinswoman, This is just a ceremony, such as we have in the city, cousin, for he has already entered, as I was telling you, and he said to me, and then again she was obliged to silence, for Faramir spoke again. Men of Gondor, the lore masters tell that it was the custom of old that the king should receive the crown from his father ere he died, or if that might not be, that he should go alone and take it from the hands of his father in the tomb where he was laid. But since things must now be done otherwise, using the authority of the steward, I have today brought hither from Randinen the crown of Irnur, the last king, whose days passed in the time of our long fathers of old. Then the guards stepped forward, and Faramir opened the casket, and he held up an ancient crown. It was shaped like the helms of the guards of the citadel, save that it was loftier, and it was all white, and the wings at either side were wrought of pearl and silver in the likeness of the wings of a sea-bird, for it was the emblem of kings who came over the sea, and 7 gems of adamant were set in the circlet, and upon its summit was a single jewel of light, of which went up like a flame. Then Aragorn took the crown and held it up and said, Et erelo endorenal utulien, sinom maruvan, ar hildinyar ten ambar meta. And those were the words that Elendil spoke when he came up out of the sea on wings of the wind. Out of the great sea to Middle Earth I am come. In this place I will abide, and my heirs unto the ending of the world. Then, to the wonder of many, Aragorn did not put the crown upon his head, but gave it back to Faramir, and said, By labor and valor of many have I come into my inheritance. In token of this, I would have the ring-bearer bring the crown to me, and let Mithrandir set it upon my head, if he will, for he has been the mover of all that has been accomplished, and this is his victory. Then Frodo came forward and took the crown from Faramir, and bore it to Gandalf, and Aragorn knelt, and Gandalf set the white crown upon his head, and said, Now come the days of the king, that he may be blessed, while the thrones of the Valar endure. But when Aragorn rose, all that beheld him gazed in silence, for it seemed to them that he was revealed to them now for the first time. Tall as the sea kings of old, he stood above all that were near. Ancient of days he seemed, and yet in the flower of manhood, and wisdom sat upon his brow, and strength and healing were in his hands, and a light was about him. And then Faramir cried, Behold, the king! And in that moment all the trumpets were blown, and the king Elisar went forth and came to the barrier, and Hurin of the Keys thrust it back, and amid the music of harp, and of viol, and of flute, and the singing of clear voices, the king passed through the flower-laden streets, and came to the citadel, and entered in. And the banner of the tree and the stars was unfurled upon the topmost tower, and the reign of King Elisar began, of which many songs have told. In his time, the city was made more fair than it had ever been, even in the days of its first glory, and it was filled with trees and with fountains, and its gates were wrought of mithril and steel, and its streets were paved with white marble, and the folk of the mountain labored in it, and the folk of the wood rejoiced to come there. And all was healed and made good, and the houses were filled with men and women, and the laughter of children. And no window was blind, nor any courtyard empty. And after seeing the end of the third age of the world, into the new age, it preserved the memory and the glory of the years that were gone. In the days that followed his crowning, the king sat on his throne in the hall of the kings and pronounced his judgments. And embassies came from many lands and peoples, from the east and the south, from the borders of the Mirkwood, and from Dunland in the west. And the king pardoned the Easterlings that had given themselves up, and sent them away free. And he made peace with the peoples of Harad. And the slaves of Mordor he released, and gave to them all the lands about Lake Nurnen to be their own. And there were brought before him many to receive his praise and reward for their valor. And last the captain of the guard brought to him Beregond to be judged. And the king said to Beregond, Beregond, by your sword blood was spilled in the hollows where that is forbidden. Also you left your post without leave of lord or of captain. For these things of old death was the penalty. Now therefore I must pronounce your doom. All penalty is remitted for your valor in battle, and still more because all that you did was for the love of the Lord Faramir. Nonetheless, you must leave the guard of the citadel. You must go forth from the city of Minas Tirith. Then the blood left Beregond's face, and he was stricken to the heart and bowed his head. But the king said, So it must be, for you are appointed to the White Company, the guard of Faramir, prince of Ithilien, and you shall be its captain and dwell in Emin Arnon in honor and peace, and in the service of him for whom you risked all to save him from death. And then Beregond, perceiving the mercy and justice of the king, was glad, and kneeling kissed his hand, and departed in joy and content. And Aragorn gave to Faramir Ithilien to be his princedom, and bade him dwell in the hills of Emin Arnon within sight of the city. For, he said, Minas Ithil in Morgul Vale shall be utterly destroyed, and though it may be in time come to be made clean, no man may dwell there for many long years. And last of all, Aragorn greeted Eomer of Rohan, and they embraced, and Aragorn said, Between us there can be no word of giving or taking, nor of reward, for we are brethren. In happy hour did Eor ride from the north, and never has any league of peoples been more blessed, so that neither has ever failed the other, nor shall fail. Now, as you know, we have laid Theoden the renowned in a tomb in the hollows, and there he shall lie forever among the kings of Gondor, if you will. Or, if you desire it, we will come to Rohan and bring him back to rest with his own people. And Eomer answered, Since the day when you rose before me out of the green grass of the downs, I have loved you, and that love shall not fail. But now I must depart for a while to my own realm, where there is much to heal and set in order. But as for the fallen, when all is made ready, we will return for him. But here let him sleep a while. And Eowyn said to Faramir, Now I must go back to my own land and look on it once again, and help my brother in his labor. But when one whom I long loved as father is laid at last to rest, I will return. So the glad days passed, and on the 8th day of May the riders of Rohan made ready, and rode off by the north way, and with them went the sons of Elrond. All the road was lined with people to do them honor and praise them, from the gate of the city to the walls of the Pelennor. Then all others that dwelt afar went back to their homes rejoicing, but in the city there was labor of many willing hands to rebuild and renew, and to remove all the scars of war and the memory of darkness. The hobbits still remained in Minas Tirith, with Legolas and Gimli, for Aragorn was loth for the fellowship to be dissolved. At last all such things must end, he said, but I would have you wait a little while longer. For the end of the deeds that you have shared in has not yet come. A day draws near that I have looked for in all the years of my manhood. And when it comes, I would have my friends beside me." But of that day he would say no more. In those days the companions of the ring dwelt together in a fair house with Gandalf, and they went to and fro as they wished. And Frodo said to Gandalf, "Do you know what this day is that Aragorn speaks of? For we are all happy here, and I don't wish to go, but the days are running away, and Bilbo is waiting, and the Shire is my home." "As for Bilbo," Gandalf said, "he is waiting for the same day, and he knows what keeps you. And as for the passing of the days, it is now only May, and high summer is not yet in. And though all things may seem changed, as if an age of the world has gone by, yet to the trees and of the grass it is less than a year since you set out." "Pippin," said Frodo, "didn't you say that Gandalf was less close than of old?" "He was weary of his labors then, I think. Now he is recovering." And Gandalf said, "Many folk like to know beforehand what is to be set on the table, but those who have labored to prepare the feast like to keep their secret, for wonder makes the words of praise louder, and Aragorn himself waits for a sign." There came a day when Gandalf could not be found, and the companions wondered what was going forward. But Gandalf took Aragorn out from the city by night, and he brought him to the southern feet of the Mount Mindolin. And here they found a path made in ages past that few now dared to tread, for it led up on the mountain to a high hollow, where only the kings had been wont to go. And they went up by steep ways until they came to a high field below the snows that clad the lofty peaks, and it looked down over the precipice that stood behind the city. And standing there they surveyed the lands, for the morning was come, and they saw the towers of the city far below them like white pencils touched by the sunlight. And all the vale of Anduin was like a garden, and the mountains of shadow were veiled in a golden mist. Upon the one side their sight reached to the grey Emyn Muil, and the glint of Rhoros was like a star twinkling far off, and upon the other side they saw the river like a ribbon laid down to Pelargir. And beyond that was a light on the hem of the sky that spoke of the sea. And Gandalf said, "This is your realm, and the heart of the greater realm that shall be. The third age of the world is ended, and the new age is begun, and it is your task to order its beginning and to preserve what may be preserved. For though much has been saved, much must now pass away, and the power of the three kings also is ended. And all the lands that you see, and those that lie round about them, shall be dwellings of men. For the time comes of the dominion of men, and the elder kindred shall fade or depart." "I know it well, dear friend," said Aragorn, "but I would still have your counsel." "Not for long now," said Gandalf. "The third age was my age, and the enemy of Sauron. I was the enemy of Sauron. My work is finished. I shall go soon. The burden must lie now upon you and your kindred." "But I shall die," said Aragorn, "for I am a mortal man. And though being what I am, and of the race of the West unmingled, I shall have life far longer than other men, yet that is but a little while. And when those who are now in the wombs of women are born and have grown old, I shall too grow old. And who then shall govern Gondor, and those who look to this city as to their queen, if my desire has not been granted? The tree in the court of the fountain is still withered and barren. When shall I see a sign that it will ever be otherwise?" "Turn your face from the green world, and look where all seems barren and cold," said Gandalf. Then Aragorn turned, and there was a stony slope behind him, running down from the skirts of the snow. And as he looked, he was aware that alone there in the waste was a growing thing stood. And he climbed to it, and saw that out of the very edge of the snow there sprang a sapling tree no more than 3 foot high. Already it had put forth young leaves, long and shapely, dark above and silver beneath, and upon its slender crown it bore one small cluster of flowers whose white petals shone like the sunlit snow. And then Aragorn cried, "Ye, Utavenyes! I have found it. Lo! Here is a sign of the eldest of trees. But how comes it here? For it is not itself yet 7 years old. And Gandalf, coming, looked at it, and said, Verily, this is a sapling of the line of Nimloth the Fair, and that was a seedling of Gathilion, and that a fruit of Telperion, of many names, eldest of trees. Who shall say how it comes here in the appointed hour? But this is an ancient hollow, and ere the kings failed, or the tree withered in the court, a fruit must have been set here. For it is said that, though the fruit of the tree comes seldom to ripeness, yet the life within may then lie sleeping through many long years, and none can foretell the time in which it will awake. Remember this, for if ever a fruit ripens, it should be planted, lest the line die out of the world. Here it is lain hidden on the mountain, even as the race of Elendil lay hidden in the wastes of the north. Yet the line of Nimloth is older far than your line, King Elessar. Then Aragorn laid his hand gently to the sapling, and lo, it seemed to hold on lightly to the earth, and it was removed without hurt, and Aragorn bore it back to the citadel. Then the withered tree was uprooted, but with reverence, and they did not burn it, but laid it to rest in the silence of Rathdinan. And Aragorn planted the new tree in the court by the fountain, and swiftly and gladly it began to grow. And when the month of June entered, it was laden with blossom. The sign has been given, said Aragorn, and the day is not far off. And he set watchmen upon the walls. It was the day before midsummer when messengers came from Amundin and to the city, and they said that there was a riding of fair folk out of the north, and they drew near now to the walls of the Pelennor. And the king said, At last they have come. Let all the city be made ready. Upon the very eve of midsummer, when the sky was blue as sapphire, and the white stars opened in the east, but the west was still golden, and the air was cool and fragrant, the riders came down the north way to the gates of Minas Tirith. First rode Elrohir and Elladan with a banner of silver, and then came Glorfindel and Eristor and all the houses of Rivendell, and after them came the Lady Galadriel of Celeborn, Lord of Lothlorien, riding upon white steeds, and with them many fair folk of their land, grey-cloaked with white gems in their hair. And last came Master Elrond, mighty among elves and men, bearing the scepter of Anuminas. And beside him upon a grey palfrey rode Arwen, his daughter, Evanstar of her people. And Frodo, when he saw her come glimmering in the evening, with stars on her brow and a sweet fragrance about her, was moved with great wonder. And he said to Gandalf, At last I understand why we have waited. This is the ending. Now not a day only shall be beloved, but night too shall be beautiful and blessed, and all its fear pass away. Then the king welcomed his guests, and they alighted, and Elrond surrendered the scepter, and laid the hand of his daughter in the hand of the king, and together they went up into the high city, and all the stars flowered in the sky. And Aragorn, the king Elessar, wedded Arwen and Domiel in the city of the kings upon the day of midsummer, and the tale of their long waiting and labors was come to fulfillment. Thank you for tuning in. Join us next time for the first part of Chapter 6, Book 6 of The Return of the King. Good night, Flagstaff.